Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Jim Jordan just takes a torch to Jasmine Crockett, and he comes bringing all of the receipts. Let's dive in.
The public is worried. Career attorneys are worried. Congress is worried. The world is worried. Every day that passes, the Department of Justice is losing institutional knowledge and exceptional attorneys because of a blind arrogance and vengeance. We owe it to this country to come together to call out weaponization happening today, to call out corruption, government abuse, attacks on innocent people, and the targeting of people with different political views. We owe it to everyone to speak the truth, even if the truth is hard to hear. We owe it to us all to preserve our country's rule of law.
I now recognize the great chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Ohio, Jim Jordan, for his opening statement.
I don't know about the great part, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. They could never tell us who planted the pipe bombs on January 6th. They could never tell us who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and they could never tell us who put cocaine at the White House. But they sure had time for a lot of other things. October 2nd, 2021, they set up a snitch line to report moms and dads who have the nerve to show up at a school board meeting and advocate for their son or daughter. On September 23rd, 2022, 10 unmarked cars pull up to Mark Houck's home, arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children. And what did he do wrong? What did he do wrong? Praying in front of an abortion clinic. And when some crazy guy comes up and starts yelling obscenities in his kid's face, he makes sure he deals with that guy. He went to court. The jury found him not guilty. On November 18th, 2022, the chairman talked about this. Actually before that, summer of 2022, raid on President Trump's home. President Trump's attorney said, you can come. They were working with him. No, we got to do a raid. We had actually Mr. Stephen D'Antuono, head of the Washington field office, tell us how wrong that was, how they broke all kinds of protocol. 2 months later, Mr. Garland appoints Jack Smith as special prosecutor. And as the chairman pointed out in his opening statement, the lead prosecutor, Jay Bratt, used the promise of a judgeship to try to pressure one of the defendant's lawyers. You're not allowed to do that. We're going to talk to Mr. Bratt at some point in this committee. We'll have him in for a deposition. January 23rd, 2023, FBI Richmond field office issues a memorandum where it says, if you're a pro-life Catholic, you might be a domestic violent extremist. Can't tell us who put cocaine at the White House, but you can call Catholics extremists. Spring of 2023, 2 brave whistleblowers come forward and tell us about the sweetheart deal that David Weiss was trying to do for Hunter Biden. Of course, those guys' reward for coming forward as good, brave whistleblowers was to have their security clearances taken from them and be retaliated against. 6:01 a.m., March 19th, 2024, Brian Malinowski, Little Rock, Arkansas, highest paid official in the Little Rock government, runs the Bill and Hillary Clinton Airport. 6:01, all these folks show up in the morning. First thing they do is put tape on the doorbell cam, and they're coming after Mr. Malinowski, a warrant to search his home because they believed he had sold 6 guns that he wasn't supposed to sell. 6:01, tape on the doorbell cam. 53 seconds later, Brian Malinowski shot in the head, later dies. They could have handled that. The SWAT team and everything else, just talk to his lawyers. You could have, all kinds of ways you could have handled that to avoid the terrible outcome. We had Brian Malinowski's spouse here last Congress. His lawyer testified. Tragic story because of this Justice Department, the previous Justice Department, and the way they handled things. And don't forget, December 12, 2024, when the Inspector General told us about the 26 confidential human sources who were there on January 6, 2021. 17 went in restricted space, which they were not authorized to do. 4 went in the Capitol, which they were not authorized to do. None of them were charged. 2 of the 4 who went in the Capitol were asked to be there by the FBI. We got all kinds of questions about that incident, about those confidential human sources, all kinds of questions we want answered. Now, thank goodness, and the chairman referenced this as well, thank goodness Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino are now going to be running the Justice Department, where we won't have this kind of ridiculous focus on agencies being turned on the very people they're supposed to serve. We sent 7 subpoenas today. 7 subpoenas that we sent asking for information about all these issues. We want everything you got so the American people have answers. Maybe it's not as bad as I think, but one thing I've learned in my time in Congress with these investigations, every single time, the only thing we get wrong is it's always worse than we thought. It is always worse than we thought.
It always is a little worse than we thought. That's what seems to happen every time congressional testimony comes up, and that's because when you have a bloated bureaucracy that doesn't seem to do its job effectively, and when it is effective, it's often breaking so many protocols that you have to wonder who greenlit the project. And then you start to realize just how weaponized and malicious intended, if that's even a word, malicious intended, but of the malicious intent of our own federal government against American citizens. The list of things that Jim Jordan just ran through here should be a stain on our national honor and our national identity. A nation born out of the idea that we have certain inalienable rights, then only to have this ridiculously long list of those rights either being broken or being smashed or just being circumvented, all to serve a president of the last 4 years. Hey, real quick, did you know thousands of Americans were jumping on the #1 precious metals offer in the country right now? And they're turning to my new partners, the #1 precious metals company, Goldco. If you've got over $50,000 in retirement savings, you might qualify for an exclusive offer from Goldco. We're talking about up to 10% back in bonus silver just for taking the opportunity to protect your savings. This isn't one of those sketchy free gold deals where they come with a whole bunch of strings attached. Nope. When they say get 10% back in bonus silver, they mean get 10% back. No gotchas, no fine print used to trick you, just your 10%. Plus the first-class customer service. Plus the great buyback program. There's a reason Goldco has won a bunch of awards. They are the real deal. So go to PolitibralGold.com. You'll get a free 2025 gold and silver kit and learn more how to get your 10% while learning how to protect your savings. It's a win-win, but don't wait as supplies are limited. Go to PolitibralGold.com. That's PolitibralGold.com. When we say there's a deep state, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the amount of bureaucrats that seem to stick around no matter who the president is. They work for about 30, 35 years. They retire early, get these ridiculous pensions, because apparently, and I'm going to switch over to Jasmine Crockett here in a moment, not doing so would be a brain drain. I would believe Jasmine Crockett when she says this outlandish thing, if there was any merit to her words to begin with. She doesn't have a great track record in that regard. And that actually is an interesting point. The federal bureaucracy is terrified of a brain drain, because it's harder to get people to work for the federal government when they can make more money elsewhere, particularly if they're a defense contractor. So that is a fundamental problem, that it is harder to find good state, good city, good county, good federal employees under your belt because, well, the free market's going to find something faster, cheaper, and then get more value out of that labor. So we have to incentivize in other ways. That's why so many states have had these pension problems. And red states seem to have a good grasp of figuring out these problems. Blue states don't. Jasmine Crockett, you should look to Texas and see what they've done on that. And you might want to take some notes. But the brain drain thing, again, that would have merit if it was literally anyone else except Jasmine Crockett. You get an older Democrat like the late Dianne Feinstein, I would actually listen to her on that, and I would give reason to pause, because that kind of Democrat is someone that used to say, hey, we know there's bloat, but we feel that's just sort of part of the system. It's better to have that than to cut too much and then have a much worse product. That's at least a believable line of thinking, but the Democrat Party's new policies, their new ideas, have strayed so far from that. And now we have got a weaponized FBI that went after American citizens, can't locate certain items that should have been located in the White House. When you have that nose candy hanging around, you got to be careful about who's bringing it in. You kind of need to know these things. And then there were certain things about that cold day in January that leave a little bit too much to the imagination. Or rather, if you're good at putting puzzles together, you know what the missing pieces seem to be. Eventually, once you start putting all the pieces together and you're down to your last 4 or 5, you know what the picture's going to be. And you're just waiting around to find that last final piece. So, yeah, we know that there's been a problem with our federal government, and this has nothing to do with the brain drain anymore. That fear doesn't need to be a part of the new conversation that we need to have. The conversation needs to be, how do we de-weaponize and defang the federal government from going after its own citizens? We apparently, under the Biden administration, went after Catholics and anti-abortionists. All right, I'm a Protestant myself and fairly proud of it. But going after Catholics does not seem right to me, because they share the same values as a whole lot of Protestants. I mean, it's kind of the same religion there, just one has a funny dude hanging around the Vatican in Rome, and the other has probably some funny little church out in the hills somewhere. And that's not what matters. What matters is that these Americans are allowed their First Amendment right, which doesn't just give us the right to free speech, but it also gives us the right to have the freedom of religion. This was fundamental to our founding as a nation, because the colonies, you had Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Northern Virginia had a ton of Catholics. They had a ton of Quakers. They had a ton of Protestants come through, but these were Scotch-Irish ones that didn't play well with others, and they moved into Appalachia. So we have a founding where there's a diverse amount of different sects of the Christian religion, but it now has been opened up to all religions. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we have watched our Justice Department be weaponized against people because of their Christianity. And I really hate putting it in those religious terms, because I'd rather stick to politics. I know I did just have a video the other day where I invoked Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes, but that was a cultural point and a cultural moment. This is something entirely different. This is something that hits our rights right where it hurts, and it needs to stop. And that's why we voted for Donald Trump in 2024. That's why he won all 7 swing states, and that's why Jim Jordan is sounding off on Jasmine Crockett, whose only complaint here is that a potential brain drain can happen from the federal government. At this point, I think it needs it. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.